just a little out of reach.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We will begin in just a few moments.
These presents don't really come for free. Your paycheck don't mean that much to me. Just take my hand and hold me tight. You'll never buy my love. You buy me this and you buy me that. So bend over and lean over. You got me wrong and that's a fact. Something that you got to know is, will you realize when I'm gone that I dance to a different love? Will you realize when I'm gone that I dance to a different song? It's a shame, but I got to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Techonomy NYC 2018. And now, please welcome to the stage CEO of Techonomy, Josh Campbell.
Well, thank you and welcome to day two. Obviously, yesterday we covered a lot of topics from 5G to libraries to meeting a future presidential candidate to the future of food. And I think one of the things I heard a lot yesterday was people were looking at the agenda and all the topics we were going to cover, and we're trying to figure out that common thread, and really it made sense by the end of the day. So we hope today will be as diverse and give you guys a lot of ideas. Thanks last night to NASDAQ for hosting the reception. A lot of you made it to Times Square. It was a great facility. Couple housekeeping things. You know, our handle and our hashtag will be on all the slides. We were trending yesterday, hashtag Techonomy NYC, and you realize when you're trending, people start hijacking your hashtag. So we started to see some odd products and services using the Techonomy hashtag, but maybe it means we've made it. So continue to use that hashtag. Really want to thank again our sponsors. You heard from some of them yesterday, but these are the companies that really support us throughout the year and make our events possible. Again, our presenting partners, Johnson & Johnson and Philips, our supporting partners, Ericsson, NASDAQ, Salesforce, and W2O Group, and our media marketing partners, the NYC EDC, PC Mag, Propelify, and Tech NYC. One thing we didn't talk a lot about yesterday, but you'll start getting more information, is about our event coming up this November in Half Moon Bay. So for some of you, you've been out to this amazing environment, out to the Ritz there. We host a 2.5-day event this coming November 11th through 13th. You'll all receive an invitation. We hope you'll join us there. We are going to be around, the team will be around soliciting feedback about this event. We're always trying to do better. So we encourage you, we have thick skins, so to give us, the good, the bad, the ugly, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you think we could do better. And we hope to really engage you in making the event as great as it could be. Today, one of the structural changes, the lunch will take place back in this room. It'll be an interactive lunch session where we'll discuss tech addiction. So one thing which will be a very interesting discussion about our smartphone addiction and tech addiction. So at this point, I want to introduce our first speaker, Morgan Yakis. Morgan and I and David met just a couple months ago at South by Southwest. Morgan is a 20-year fashion veteran turned wellness expert. So she spent many years in fashion, is now a wellness expert. She's named by Vogue as the top 5 wellness experts for the fashion world. And today she'll bring us through an active meditation to balance our left and right brain to create calm, presence, and focus. So, welcome, Morgan. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing this morning? Good? Well, we'll include a jolt of coffee in the meditation so that you'll feel really good after. So I have a little bit less time than I originally thought, so I'm going to kind of speed through some things. And so just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was in fashion for 20 years. I owned a very successful business. I had employees. I was a manufacturer. We sold all over the world. I sold to Barney's, and we also had a store where we sold to all different kinds of people, including celebrities, people in the fashion industry, of all kinds of industries. So I've done retail for a really long time. And I was a stylist. I also was on tour with Lauryn Hill, who was, for her Miseducation tour, I styled her. And I also was a stylist for a very long time. So, and did PR and for Gucci and worked for many, many, many different companies. So I left doing that about a few years ago to do this work that I'm doing now, which is all based on neuroscience. I do something called human cartography. And basically what that is and what that means is that it's a map of the body, of the brain, and it's different ways to achieve things and move through life. And all the work that I do is based on neuroscience, so with people. So it's basically if there's a block, if there's something that you can't move through, or there's something that you want to achieve, I work with people and I teach them how to do that by unfreezing things that get frozen in the brain or frozen in a situation. I do this with individuals in my practice, and so I work with a lot of different kinds of people from a lot of different kinds of backgrounds, everyone from CEOs to all the way down to different kinds of people in the companies. And one thing that I do find that when I work with everyone, and I'm going to do this today, but I had done something in London at with a company called Matches, which is a very, very big fashion company, and I did a meditation there, and I taught their people different kinds of things. And basically, the thing that people always write on the card, which I'm going to ask you to do today, is just being focused, being happy, being relaxed, being calm. These are the things that I find that everyone wants. And so basically, I'm going to show you a quick technique today to shift any state that you have a problem with or that you want to get out of, to become, to shift whatever you want to shift. And so I'm just going to kind of move into that now because there's not a lot of time. And then we'll move into a quick little meditation. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this technique. I want you to think about something that is maybe bothering you, that you were, happened today or during the week. And we're going to shift this, so you're not going to be in that space very long. So just think about like a stressful email, a person, a thing, something that's coming up that might feel stressful. And I just want you to think about that now and see if you can actually feel that in your body. You might usually, when you light up the neural networks, you also feel it inside. And so that means you're actually in the state. So what I want you to do is, now that you are feeling that, I want you to just actually look up and find a spot above eye level. And I want you to now just notice all the space in front of you without moving your eyes. And then notice all the space to the left of you without moving your eyes. And all the space to the right of you. And all the space behind you. And if you want to, you can close your eyes. And if your legs are crossed, maybe uncrossing them, putting your feet on the floor. And now just noticing all the space around you. And just noticing how your feet feel on the floor. And maybe you could quickly imagine that you could fly up over this building, and you could be 360 degrees. And if your eyes are still open and you want to close them, that's the whole idea. Just noticing all the space below you as you might be 360 degrees above New York City. Seeing what you might notice that maybe you hadn't noticed before. And then just flying up even higher. Imagining that you could see all of New York, all the way north of the city and south of the city. You could see all the waterways of New York. And so noticing that you could fly up even above the cloud line, going even higher, flying up and into space, noticing the distance between you and the rest of the planet. Noticing the distance between you and the rest of the universe. Noticing all the space in front of you. And all the space behind you. Noticing the space in between breaths. In between thoughts. Maybe allowing your body to relax, integrating everything from the last couple of days. Maybe just having a new perspective. A new perspective on the planet. can you imagine that the planet could look in 6 months with you in it? Maybe 2 years from now, as you're maybe even orbiting the Earth, what would you notice that maybe you hadn't noticed before or would want to see happening? Dropping into a beautiful place that you love. And I want you to just see the near future version of you on a screen in front of you, just noticing what it might look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now in the future, when you have all that purpose, all that focus, all that clarity, calmness. What does the global environment look like with you in it? As the world is connected, perhaps even more social responsibility. Just setting maybe an intention now for that near future version of you, of something that you might want to create or do for yourself or on a bigger scale. And then just getting into that future version of you and trying it on. And as you're in there trying it on, see how it might feel in some different situations. Thinking about something that you can do in the now to create the best possible future. Future of you, future of the planet. And then just taking those future resources and bringing them back into the now. Taking a deep breath if you want and anchoring them in. Because when you can see the best future version of you, you can then start to create it. That's the key to creating the best future. Maybe not even being attached to the outcome, knowing that it can change. So just flying back into the here and now, anchoring in any feelings or thoughts or experiences that you have. And then when I count to 3, you can just be feeling alert and awake, awakening all the senses, feeling focused and ready for the day. Maybe setting an intention of what you might want to get out of today or this last 2 days. And with a smile on your face, getting those good chemicals going. Just counting 1, 2, just kind of moving around the body, awakening all the senses, feeling refreshed and renewed, focused and energized. 3, whenever you're ready, just opening your eyes and coming back into the room. Okay. So now just quickly before I hand over to the next person, I just want you to think about the thing that you originally were thinking about before you started doing this and see what you notice about that. Some people say that they can't even remember what they were thinking about. So if you want to try this technique, you can email me and I can give you more information. I work with companies and also private clients. I go between New York and LA, and I'll be here for the next the next 10 days. But I'll be around, and I would love to hear about your experience that you had, or if you have any questions for me. I do hypnosis and NLP, and and meditation, active meditation. So that was a lot of everything combined in the meditation today. So if you have any questions, I'll be around. Please feel free to come up to me and tell me about your experience, or if you saw anything interesting or had any epiphanies. I would love to hear about it. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Morgan. That was great. Jeffrey, so actually that was not a bad, it was not bad in many ways. I definitely was getting a lot out of Morgan's meditation there, but it was a useful, I think, way to lead into our conversation with Jeffrey Sachs in several respects. One, the global approach. And I think for me, when I was thinking about what it is that I want to accomplish in coming years, it really is connected to why we asked Jeffrey to be here today. Here at Techonomy, I would say we're worried, despite our optimism, despite our conviction that technology is a positive force, that the world is not taking its own challenge seriously enough. And as we mentioned yesterday, the Sustainable Development Goals are a big part of how we think about our own work and structuring it and structuring our thinking and our priorities. The Sustainable Development Goals for the United Nations articulated 17 goals for 2030 that pretty much cover the full range of challenges facing the planet. Jeffrey is one of the architects of that set of goals with that approach, and one of the great advocates for taking responsibility more seriously and being more methodical about how we address the challenges that we face. So, welcome.
Good morning.
And you know, I don't know if I
Now
need...
that you're also calm, I want to raise your stress level again.
Well,
I promise to create a lot of anxiety in the next few minutes.
It might be appropriate. Jeffrey's a professor at Columbia. He's an advisor to the UN Secretary General. He's written a number of fantastic books. You created the Earth Institute, didn't you originally?
I inherited it.
You inherited, okay. Well,
yeah.
you turned it into something huge, and you're still there, although you're not running it, the whole thing anymore. But basically, a lot of your work is focused on how we can achieve the SDGs, the global goals, by 2030. So talk about why that's such a priority for you.
The basic idea is that we have, obviously, the technology. That's what brings us together here. We have the incredible affluence, and we're blowing it. This is the simple point. We have made a world that is wealthy and a world that is really teched up, and we're destroying the planet. We're nasty to each other. We have elected an idiot for president, and that's a symptom of a society that's in deep crisis. So I really am here to raise your anxiety level. Because things don't work on their own, and we kid ourselves to think that things are fine. Of course, we're in the center of the greatest wealth on the planet in the few square blocks we're meeting. We feel fine. If you're a highly skilled person, life seems probably better than ever, as long as you can tune out most of the world's realities. And our economic system does not solve problems like protecting the planet from human-induced global warming or human-induced destruction of habitat and biodiversity, which have reached scales that, if you're attuned to the scientists, are completely unprecedented in human civilization. And we've reached a level of derangement of our politics, which is so corrupt and so money-driven that we can't solve problems anymore. We can't even talk straight. Think of last night. How many things are we supposed to deal with? Israeli attacks on Iranian positions in Syria, absolutely against international law. Trump's withdrawal from an agreement endorsed by all other countries in the world or Michael Cohen receiving money from Russian oligarchs into the account. And that's for consulting services. That guy's really a great consultant, we know, if you want mafia services. So we're really in trouble, ladies and gentlemen. We are not in a good situation. Sorry.
Okay, that was even slightly grimmer than I expected.
I'm always in a bad mood in the morning because I get up.
He had a big smile on when he walked in this morning.
I read the Wall Street Journal, filled with lies on the editorial pages, filled with bad news on
you should
very
read the
good
Financial
news pages.
Times anyway.
I do also.
Okay.
but
So you did have a smile on.
I
so
do.
You haven't given up, clearly. That's one reason you're here. The global goals are, a very somewhat abstract set of targets. But what's the way you think about, if you can be optimistic in the face of what you're saying, which I believe you to be in some fundamental way, is there a pathway that you can see, leave the goals even aside, just towards comity and civility and collective commitment in general, which is something I think that so many of us, mourn the absence of, and if we didn't care about it, we wouldn't be doing this conference. This is really a motivation for us. This is our small way of helping, but what do you think we could all do together to make things better?
The reason I like these goals, and let me describe them in a moment.
There's still some nature left. The birds.
Oh, sorry.
I was just sorry.
Yeah. No, let me say why not that I'm optimistic, but that I think we should figure out a way out of the very peculiar position that we're in, and why I think these goals make a difference. So the idea is basically this.
Tell me something.
We've got everything going for us. We really have created an astounding amount of know-how. And obviously, the digital revolution that is really at the core of this meeting and the core of our world right now offers phenomenal solutions to lots of things beyond streaming movies or paying for advertising on the internet. We could really solve a lot of problems about low-carbon energy, about protecting the biosphere, about monitoring habitat, about making our cities, like our wonderful New York City, work better. So there's no reason at all for technological pessimism, this is for sure. There's no reason for economic pessimism in the sense that world output is now $130 trillion a year. That's a lot, by the way. Even for a macroeconomist used to these numbers, $130 trillion measured at international prices is a tremendous amount of productivity.
What was that about? What would that have been like 10 years ago?
We've been basically achieving growth of 3 to 4% per year pretty consistently, with the bad bump in 2008. But that means a doubling time every 20 years or so. So you can say that 20 years ago we would have been roughly at half that, and 40 years ago roughly at a fourth of that level. That's a good growth rate. That means at that level of wealth there should be no extreme poverty on the planet. Children shouldn't be dying of poverty, as about 6 million do every year. We shouldn't be in desperation over hunger. We should be understanding that we have the surplus we need to revamp our energy system, to get out of fossil fuels, to move to a renewable energy-based system, which my group issued a report last week showing how New England and the U.S. Northeast could basically become zero carbon with smart grids and a good interconnection with Canada and Canadian hydropower, among other things, linking up with our wind and solar here. So there are ways to solve problems. My worry is that we don't solve problems right now, that our politics are profoundly corrupt. We have a pay-for-play politics in this country, even cruder than I imagined, because look at all the companies that paid Trump off through transfers to
But I want to
his.
get.
No, but let me just say.
Okay.
But this is really important. We're not solving problems in this country.
But how do we
We
get
don't even
there?
think. Well, first we have to call out the scoundrels.
I guess that's true.
We absolutely have to call out the scoundrels. And there are two kinds of scoundrels. One is, of course, the politicians, most of whom are one way or another on the take in our system. And second is the business sector, which in this city and to a large extent around this country is amoral or immoral in its practices, a lot of it, because the hedge funds or Wall Street or many other sectors don't care except for the bottom line. And so they're in this business, and we keep seeing the revelations of this. Look at the oil industry. Look at David and Charles Koch. I was at the AMNH last weekend going through the halls of biodiversity. Well, okay, I can imagine them giving the hall of species extinction because they're experts in it. They're doing that. They're funding all of the anti-climate change action in the
On the
U.S.
other
Senate.
hand, we
And
have
then-
Blackstone on the stage later today, and they're really trying to think differently and take a step towards telling business they need to. So there are positive signs, right?
Yes, there are some positive signs, and I hope that they follow through. I want all of you to follow through, though, to understand how serious our problems are, not because they're unsolvable, but because we don't try, and because we're absolutely locked in a cycle of greed that's astounding. Maybe it is, with Morgan, the right starting point, which is that is that her name?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is that what are we thinking? Or are we thinking? Because we have a serious need to make a number of changes. Why is it that we gave a tax cut of $2 trillion last December, and now yesterday the White House calls for $15 billion of cuts, including the CHIPS program, child health for poor kids? Are we out of our minds? Is there any limit to the cruelty of Mr. Trump, who is a clinical psychopath? I'm sorry to say it. Really. This is important because we have I'm sorry, but we have a president.
I don't think anybody needs to be convinced
I
that
know.
Donald Trump's a little bit unbalanced.
No,
I mean,
but I think
or a lot. But
I think the important
question
point
is, what
though,
do you do about it?
Right. So the reason there are goals is that we need to orient ourselves towards what's important. And what the Sustainable Development Goals call for are clear metrics for the U.S. and for every other country by the year 2030. They call for decarbonizing the energy system. They call for protecting habitat. They call for reducing inequality. We have the highest inequality in our modern history in this country, measured by the Gini coefficient and other technical measures, the Palmer ratio and so forth. They call for safe water. We can't even get safe water in the United States anymore. Can you imagine? And it's not just Flint. It's hundreds of cities around this country. We can't take seriously the fact that large parts of our country, including Manhattan, are going to face massive crises from sea level rise this century if we continue the way we're continuing. And we have a political system designed right now to ignore all of that. So the idea of the goals is you read them, you look at them. If you are like me, is an academic, you study pathways to achieve them. If you're in business, you say, how do we align with them, not how do we spend all our time lobbying against them. This is the future we need to make. How could technologies address these issues? That's where I find the most interesting thinking.
Well, luckily we have a major corporation, Novozymes, on stage in just a few minutes that is specifically thinking about how aligning its own strategy towards the global goals makes sense, even from a standpoint of growth and profit for themselves, and certainly with the benefit of the planet. But so I mean, I think it's appropriate that we should be worried. That's why we put you on the cover of our magazine. But I will say that I am struck now, and I was struck when we sat for 2 hours at your apartment not too long ago, with the gravity of your concern, even though I know, because it seems for years, even for several years, Techonomy opened with showing the gapminder.org data. That is to show that, for all of the things we worry about, the basics have been getting better on the planet for a long time. Infant mortality, lifespan has been lengthening on a global basis. Average global wealth is, as you pointed out, has been growing, and many of the measures, even as applied to individuals, have been getting better and better. So clearly, there are good things happening in the context that we may be destroying the environment in which we live, which is obviously of great concern. I don't know why I'm going through that, except that I just want you to factor in the positive growth. And I mean, I guess I'm just trying to get you to tell us a way to address this without a fatalistic sense of fear.
Yeah. I think that all of these analyses, including Steven Pinker's new book about all of the progress, are basically a bit of a misunderstanding. And the way I think is right to understand it is what President John F. Kennedy said at his inaugural address in 1961. He said, "The world is different now, for mankind holds in his mortal hands the ability to end all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life." And that is the most succinct definition of our existence in the modern world. Trying to tally up the positives and say the world is great is a mistake. Tallying up all the negatives and saying the world is lost is a mistake. Rather, understanding that the world is a choice for us.
We face choices every minute.
We face choices individually, but now we face collectively a choice, because the problems that we face are global. They have nothing to do with a trade war or a $100 billion imbalance with China, or ripping up a carefully negotiated agreement with Iran. These have nothing to do with our real problems, nor are our problems properly measured by whether the unemployment rate is 3.9% today or 4.1%, or whether the Dow is at 24,000 or 26,000. We're living in a world where all of these short-run bombarding signals are a distraction from some quite fundamental issues. We're 7.5 billion people on the planet. We'll soon be 9 billion people. We're in the middle of an unprecedented derangement of the physical environment in 3 fundamental ways: global warming, loss of species, and massive chemical pollutants all over the planet, ocean and terrestrial. We have such a derangement of our mentality and our political system, which has been taken over by money everywhere, that multiple leaders around the world are in jail or should be in jail, our own included, I'm quite sure, if this investigation uncovers the kinds of evidence that we learned about last night. And we are therefore really in need of some anchors of what we should be doing. For 15 years, I worked on what were called the Millennium Development Goals, which were goals to address extreme poverty. I can tell you the funny experience. I fought like hell, and strangely enough, made progress with the George W. Bush administration, which at the time I regarded as the worst presidency of modern history. Now it looks phenomenal. But W put in money into fighting AIDS and malaria. Strange, by the way, it made a huge difference. as I predicted and as others predicted, we saved millions and millions of lives. Then couldn't even get Obama's attention, by the way. So weird, just to tell you how strange everything really is in our politics right now. So I'm not especially partisan. I just don't like the whole thing for the moment.
Do you think there's some point in maybe having the Paris Accords are one thing, but do we need to have some kind of global coming together to try to address this?
Well, we do, by the way, we did. And we had two of them. One is the whole world agreed on, we've had three global comings together. One was the Sustainable Development Goals. All 193 governments agreed after 3 years of detailed work. Every day, 3 years. They agreed on 17 goals. Of course, most people never heard of them, don't know about them. I'm trying to keep them a secret from Washington because Mr. Trump would bomb them if he knew about them. Second was the Paris Climate Agreement, 10 years of work, at least. One could even say 23 years of work because the Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed in 1992. Kyoto was negotiated in 97, but the US Senate, in its wisdom, never ratified it. 2009 was an attempt to negotiate so-called Copenhagen Agreement that failed. So in 2015, we finally got a climate agreement. And then our corruption of the Koch brothers, ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, they get us to pull out immediately. That's not even Trump, by the way. That's just the Republican Congress, which is so corrupt and so much on the pay of the oil industry, they wouldn't even utter an honest word about climate change. They are not as stupid as they look. They are so corrupt that they will never say an honest word about climate change. So that was the second meeting. The third was to try to stop a war in the Middle East. And that was a universal agreement that Trump pulled out of yesterday. So we meet a lot globally. We actually agree on things globally. Yesterday's agreement is not a bilateral agreement between the US and Iran. It is a global agreement. It was reached by not only every permanent member of the UN Security Council, also the Security Council, also all the UN membership. Trump is nuts. Sorry to tell you. And the fact that it's globally agreed is the reason to pull out, because it's an affront to his megalomania, as well as, of course, to his various U.S. client states or so-called allies in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia and Israel.
I want to get the audience's help to ask
which
a
want to
question.
have a war. So we have, ladies and gentlemen, we have global agreements. We actually have a world, a few blocks from here is the United Nations. It's a wondrous institution.
Wondrous.
It keeps us alive if it works.
Yeah.
It was the greatest invention by the greatest American president, FDR. And it works, and it's in our neighborhood. And we're doing everything to destroy it in this country right now, including with an incredibly nasty ambassador who lectures the others that we pay money, you don't vote with us, we're not getting our returns. That's wonderful diplomacy, I can tell you, Madam Ambassador. That's how you're going to win votes? By telling them you're on our take? Well, it doesn't work in this world. A little respect might work.
A lot of what you're saying is agreed by many of the other countries, luckily, I think. I mean,
So agreed by all of them.
yeah.
No, we're right now 192 against 1.
Yeah. Okay, can we get the lights up? Okay, let's get the mic right here.
Are you happy yet?
Yes, I know.
I'm actually not, well, yeah, I am.
Could we get the
actually.
house lights up?
I am pretty agitated.
We should have done that in the afternoon, I guess, not the morning. But I'm Veni Markowski. I'm spending most of my time at the UN representing ICANN as the UN engagement
Wonderful.
VP. And I wanted to ask you actually to bring it a little bit to the tech part of the conference. What do you think could be the role of the UN in all these tech agreements? And, they talk a lot in the last year, the new Secretary General has been talking a lot about frontier technologies and the UN role. And, there is a lot of conversation going on within the UN system. Do you see any particular place for the UN within the tech?
Let me say where I see the role of tech in these problems, which is that if you take any of the problems that are identified in the Sustainable Development Goals, I mentioned several of them: transition to a low-carbon economy, universal access to healthcare, universal access to education. Every one of these needs tech in a serious way. There's been lots of mapping of things that could be done. If you want to get kids in school, there's nothing more wonderful than the connectivity right now. Curriculum online, classrooms where there are no teachers, raising access of children to educational materials. If you want health care, I can tell you from personal experience, there's nothing more wonderful than this and a community health worker and a backpack filled with the right medicines, because you'll save millions of lives.
Very interestingly, quickly, our partner Johnson & Johnson has a project in South Africa for pregnant women and new moms where they answer their questions on SMS.
Yes.
And they've just, I think, I just heard the other day, it's the largest digital health program in the world. And most mothers in South Africa are now using it, and it's a catalytically transformative thing. So these things can work.
This is extremely important. What's the problem? The problem in general is that we're not creating the content or operating at scale, because for most of this, it's not a business model. There are two meanings of business model. The meaning I like is business model means that you're running things in an organized, rational, scaled manner. Procedures work. You have the feedbacks, you have metrics, you have measurement. The other is it's for profit, and your quarterly shareholder report is going to report. The market economy works fine. It's very impressive for solving certain problems. It has gotten you movies streamed real time on your phones or your devices. It's really good at that. The market's good for many other things as well. The market is not good for poor people. The market is not good for nature. The market is not good for other species. And to think so is a category derangement. It's a basic misunderstanding, or that you were in a lousy economics class, not mine. And the point I'm making is the following. There are things that will not come from businesses solving problems on a market basis. And we cannot accept that in this country, because we don't want to accept that, because the businesses only want to make money. And when I go to these businesses, they, oh yeah, really important, but you're in the wrong place. Like when I asked Facebook about helping with education. Basically, I was let out the door. Why are you here? I said, because you connect the world. Yes, well, we're not interested in education. That's not Marx. That's not Marx's priority, I was told. Yeah, I said, but it's Marx's responsibility. No, but it's not Marx's priority. Why don't you go to Washington to get this done? I said, why don't
really
you?
What they
I
said?
said, why don't you pay your taxes?
Oh, God.
And then we can go to Washington. And then I was let out the door. So come on. This is the problem. The problem is the UN has no money and it has no technology. It is the meeting place to solve problems. But the business community wants profits, and governments give away all their tax revenues to the rich everywhere in the world, and then say we have no money for aid. We can't even manage. You know what we give in this country right now? 0.16% of our income. We spend 50 times that on the military. And we're trying to cut aid even more, because aid's a waste. Aid is, you know, it's not America first. So this is the real problem. The UN don't look to it for the money.
Okay, I'm going to get another question,
yeah.
Jeff. Okay, back here, the cameraman has a question, please.
Hi, I know this is a little unorthodox.
It's all right.
You mentioned a universal health care. Yesterday we saw from a presidential candidate recommending a UBI. Another big policy position that's getting traction is a jobs guarantee. I know that you were a big supporter of Bernie in the primaries, and I'm sure that you know his chief economic advisor was a proponent of MMT. I know your background's probably Keynesian, but are you familiar with modern monetary theory and how it relates to those policy positions?
Yeah, well, I think so.
We have good camera people.
Excellent. Get a close-up right now. Look, the truth is there is a basic concept in politics which has been around about 100 years called social democracy or social market economy. And the idea of social democracy or social market economy is that you have a market system, but you ensure people's needs, and you ensure that inequality doesn't get out of control. And there are a few places on the planet that follow that model, and the main ones are Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, Denmark. Germany also, to an extent, has a social market economy. Yesterday I was in Canada. Canada is much more social democracy than the United States, though somewhere in between, say, the Scandinavian model and the US model. This works. It's basic. We actually were going in that direction in the 1960s. This was from the New Deal through the New Frontier, through the Great Society. We turned away from that, starting with Nixon and then especially with Reagan. That's when our great divergence came. It is arguably linked to signing the civil rights laws of the mid-1960s, when there was the anti-civil rights rebellion of the U.S. South and the shift of politics to the right wing and to the conservative white right. And we diverged in this country from these basics. So you don't need to invent a grand new framework that doesn't exist anyplace on the planet. If you're in Sweden, no matter what job you have several weeks paid vacation, you have a year of maternity leave. If you're a father, you have 9 months of paid leave. You have free health care, you have free tuition. You pay a lot of tax, and you get a lot of benefits. And if you read the report that I issue every year with others, the World Happiness Report, you rank at the top of the world in happiness. If you're in the United States, you see that unlike the progress you mentioned, we've had life expectancy falling
In
the
the
last
United States,
2
the
years
data
in the
is
United
different.
States.
Yeah.
Life expectancy falling. We have a massive epidemic of massive depressive disorder in this country. We have a massive epidemic, obviously, of opioids. We have a massive epidemic of metabolic disease because we have a food industry absolutely out to kill us and killing us because that's our fast food industry. It's addictive, it's profitable, and it's killing us. And this is the difference of our country and others. We don't need to invent a utopia or to dream or to overthrow a market economy. We just need to be sane again. We need to be moderate again. We need to be goal-oriented again, decent again, honest. And then we can get somewhere.
Well, I hope you've helped push us more towards sanity, because I pretty much agree with everything you've said, but it's a little depressing.
No, but we'll get there. All right.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Like, I would also say that much of our program today is meant to be our response to the things Jeff is talking about. starting with our next speaker, Christina Sass of Andela, which is a New York-based startup that is really working to improve the employment prospects and the training prospects for people around the world. So Christina, let's hear something that your guys are doing that might cheer us up a little bit.
Morning. Yes, that was indeed sobering. And honestly, it's things that in the last 4 years of building Andela, we have tried to just put our head down and build. But it's true. I'm going to retitle my talk, which was the end of the last one, which is how tech can actually help. So I do think that there was a belief that sort of once the internet was widespread, that we would just lay the fiber cable and people would rise up out of poverty. That's false. There's a lot of all sorts of support that needs to help. But I will respectfully disagree with part of what Professor Sachs said, which is how markets are a force in whether or not tech can help. We firmly believe and have seen over the past 4 years that the need for technologists all over the world is going to force people to look internationally. And so this is about distributed work. It's about how distributed work is absolutely responsible. It's about how distributed work is responsible for democratizing wealth, not just distributed work. So we can retitle this one, How Tech is Helping, and also how the future of work is both distributed and how the future of wealth is distributed. So let me just set the scene a little bit. Raise your hand if you are building a company or part of a company that is currently hiring software developers. Yeah, all of us. So just to put some numbers around that, there are about 5 open jobs for every 1 software developer in the United States right now that's looking for one. So for every company that's out there trying to grow, we experience a real pain point with about 1.4 million open jobs that actually just went unfilled, completely unfilled in 2016. And so if we looked at, in the United States, how to solve this alone, if we took all of the computer science degree grads, the engineering degree grads, and even dev boot camp or career changers, that would total up by 2020 about 400,000 people total. And so you're going to still leave 1 million unfilled jobs. So this is a crisis. And you may have noticed software developers are pretty integral to the tools that all of us need to run our lives these days, and certainly the tools that we need to distribute wealth globally. Meanwhile, those coveted software developers that we need so much are working in a distributed fashion. 64% of developers in the last few years are working at least part of their full-time jobs in a distributed way, and this is a huge ramp up. We've seen this over the course of the last few years, but since 1995, a 300% rise in the amount of the distributed workforce. And so if you look at this in combination, you've got everyone needing developers, they're all working in a distributed way. We think there's about 3.5 million software developers in the United States. And once again, there's almost under 1% unemployment rate for them. They have their choice of the jobs that they want. And meanwhile, everyone's looking for tech talent. So we're going to have to look elsewhere. When we tackled this problem in 2014, I'd been working on the continent of Africa for about 5 years. And I knew the extraordinary amount of talent, and particularly the depth of the tech talent pool. And in fact, we believe Africa to be the largest and the youngest pool of untapped talent in the world. And it is also one of the most exciting places for tech startups and the tech scene. So raise your hand if you started transferring money on your mobile phone post-2014. Maybe a few of us did it before that. Okay, I think I probably transferred money on my phone for the first time in 2013. The Maasai tribe is one of the oldest tribes on the planet. They have been transferring money on their mobile phones in Nairobi and surrounding areas since 2007. So our views of the tech scene across the continent of Africa are woefully outdated. And we looked at this and said, everyone we know, every entrepreneur we know, every growing company we know, we need software developers. And meanwhile, we experience this huge, huge pool of untapped talent. And so we started a company to be able to harness the talent across the continent of Africa and combine them with companies that desperately need that talent. And so we started Andela. Our mission is to advance human potential by powering today's teams and investing in tomorrow's leaders. And I say this in the context of there's tech talent all over the globe. We think that, again, 3.5 million software developers in the States. There's 20 million worldwide. And so, I would encourage you to look at all sorts of incredible things that are happening in the wider world. This is our solution to this problem. So what we do is basically three main things. We recruit, we shape our software developers into globally competitive developers, and then we integrate them into growing companies. And when I say recruit, we laugh because the founders of Andela, it's highly unlikely that I would not be able to get into my own company today. We've had over 70,000 applications for our currently 700 software developers. It's a 0.7% acceptance rate. We once had a press piece in CNN that said, the startup that's harder to get into than Harvard. So we find just extraordinary amounts of talent, and we're screening them for problem solving and logical reasoning, and then we're looking at how they perform when they're on client engagements and seeing who performs the best, and then tweaking and retweaking exactly how we recruit. Then we spend 6 months with them in actual product teams, building the products that our company needs to scale, and making sure in simulated environments that they know both their tech stacks and extraordinary soft skills. And then thirdly, we integrate them. We fully integrate them in growing companies all over the world. And so let me just bring this to life by telling you about Tolu Komolafe. When we met Tolu, she was 25. She grew up on the outskirts of Lagos, Nairobi. She had a 4-year degree in computer science or engineering, and she was unemployed when we met her. And just to set the stage, in July of 2014, Ebola was spreading across West Africa. There was a hotly contested political race between Buhari and Goodluck Jonathan. And at that time, for her cohort, we had 2,500 applications who all took the same problem-solving logical reasoning test. And the testing service called us and said, you're crashing our systems. We've never had this many people apply to a job. What the heck is this job? And secondly, you have about 48 candidates in this pool that we believe to be in the top 2% of IQ in the world. And so it is a fact, brilliance is evenly distributed, and in the modern age, the fact that Tolu could be unemployed, living on the outskirts of Nairobi, while there's 5 open jobs for every 1 software developer in the United States, is absolutely inexcusable. So we were delighted to find Tolu, and we placed her with a company called Everplans. They are a high-growth startup right here in New York. They do end-of-life planning through a very creative online platform. And Tolu, since then, has risen to be a leader on the Everplans team. In fact, she's been over to visit them about two to three times a year, because every time they do a major product launch, they say, she's so integral to our team, we need her here. So she's now managing several of her other Andela colleagues, and also is a leader managing their Everplans team. So our software developers are fully integrated in companies, and she is a leader both on our team, helping to bring tons of other young women to apply for software developer jobs, and now has been recognized in the New York Times, in CNN. You'll see a clip later of her on Fareed Zakaria. And so this is the power and possibility of distributed work. This is the tech talent that all companies need. And it's not just us. Tolu can be an extremely effective member of that team, and she's fully co-located. It's great that she can come over 2 to 3 times a year, but God forbid what Professor Sachs has said about the leadership of today happens, and they shut down the borders. That will not stop Tolu from helping Everplans to grow. So this is a solution in technology that can absolutely help. And so we're learning all kinds of things about distributed work that companies who need to be good at it are going to have to learn themselves, to push decisions downward to teams, to really be distributed, and to constantly iterate. And it's not just us. Here are some of the leaders in distributed. I don't know about your companies, but my company is obsessed with Slack. We probably have 200 unique emojis that one could argue are just for fun, but it literally helps us communicate faster, better, and it helps us develop a company culture, a company shared values across our current locations. We're in multiple different countries. And so we're doing the push-ups to be a great distributed team too. And luckily, some of the world is taking notice. We are today 1,000 people strong. We have a huge, the mothership is in Lagos, Nigeria, with about half the company. And then we've got a modern tech campus that we're building up in Nairobi, also in Kampala. On the client side, for our partner companies, we have about 155 different partner companies, and they're in 55 cities distributed globally. And this is not like a nice little, international development project. We've raised $81 million for this company, and our investors believe that this will grow and grow and grow. And so we're looking to be at, thousands more developers. But we do need companies to buy into this. And the fact of the matter is, if you want to grow and scale, you're going to need engineers. And you're just simply going to have to look in other places. And so this is, the future of work. And so it's much more powerful that you hear it from our developers themselves. So I've told you about Tolu. Here is Tolu on the Fareed Zakaria show speaking.
Are there
for
enough
himself.
of you? Do you think it will change the country?
Yes, I think it will change the country. Every day I believe we are changing the world one line of code at a time.
So that's Tolu. Thank you very much for having us. We're here all day long, and Della will be, and would love to talk to you. If you're interested about distributed work, both the challenges, it's not easy to do. It is an entire skill set all its own, but it is eminently possible, and it will allow those 20 million technologists across the world to add to the future of work, the future of wealth. And so thank you for having me.
All right, well, maybe that cheered you up a little bit. Petter, can you join me, please? Petter Holt Nielsen is, oh wait, I guess I'm just going to sit here while he's going to show some slides, but I'm going to sit here anyway. Petter Holt Nielsen is the CEO of Novozymes, which is a Copenhagen-based multinational biotech company, which he'll tell you about, and then he and I will have a little bit of a discussion. So you're going to start out with your slides.
Thanks very much, David. The shirt I put on this morning was washed at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. A decade and a half ago, I think it probably would have been washed at 140. You may not think about the difference between 80 and 140, but it's a tremendous amount of energy. And the solution that enables this, the technology that enables this, is actually biotechnology. It's enzyme technology, and something that the company I work for is very proud to spearhead. It's a fantastic piece of technology that's been around for quite a few years. We are one of the companies. We were a startup 3 decades ago. Today we are an international company with a give and take a bit of the dollar exchange rate, about a 17 billion US market cap. So this is also business, is just the point I want to make. We're working on a lot of really exciting, cool stuff. I think laundry is pretty exciting too, but I'll try to excite you about a few other things too. We're trying to try to enable a corn plant. So now you have to travel to the Midwest. A corn plant or a soybean plant to actually recruit the right microbes in the soil to produce more with the same inputs. We're also trying to develop fine microbes that will, if we are lucky, and I think we'll be, that will be able to replace all the antibiotics that we're using prophylactically in animal feed. Those are a couple of, I think, really interesting, cool opportunities that I hope will keep you alert, excited for the next 7-8 minutes. Before I go there, I probably just want to take you down a bit of the biology lessons that you had in school. So everything we do comes from nature. It's based on nature's own technologies. It's enzyme technology. We harness the power of fungi, like the one you see on the screen. Like in any other, any other form of life, it is enzyme technology that actually drives it. Your breakfast is right now being chopped apart, digested by enzymes from your digestive system. Eventually, it will, as small components, travel into your bloodstream. It will become energy for your cells because there are enzyme systems in the cells that convert it into the energy and the power you need. That goes for everything in nature. It's any process in nature is using these systems. And as I'm sure you're aware of, nature is a pretty unique invention. It doesn't waste anything. It's almost the perfect definition of a circular economy. So it's a real cool place to go looking for solutions that can help us become more circular and more sustainable in our activities. It's actually not new. I mean, we've used these technologies for thousands of years. They actually go back to old food conservation systems, old systems for preserving our foods that were developed by the ancient Greeks and Egyptians. We know it from fermentation of beer. There's so many things that we used to do and still do with the use of these technologies. And yet, we're here today to talk about how these technologies can also become a real significant contributor to the future. And the journey has been a pretty long one. I mean, we've known it for years. We've been trying to develop these things and we've been successful in developing these things for industrial use. Nature never invented or evolved a laundry machine. That's something we did. But we have taken nature's technology and put it into the laundry machine to do exactly the cleaning of this shirt at 80 Fahrenheit and not at 140 or 200. The power of nature is really unique, and the thing that's moving so fast right now. Yesterday we heard so much about connectivity and how the digital world is moving really fast. This world is moving faster. And the reason it's moving so fast is that we now have access. We can get access to genetic codes in a way that we never could before. This world is exploding right now. It's exploding with genetic information on nature. We actually understand nature now through understanding the genetics of microbes and plants. And the future is one of coupling the genetic information with functionality. And that holds an awful lot of promises. So think about Moore's law in the digital world. This is like 2 times Moore's law. So it's exponential, and it's exploding right now. That gives us a wealth of opportunities. So I talked about laundry. It may sound a bit mundane. You meet it every time in food manufacturing to get more with less, better use of the raw materials. That's particularly true on husbandry and animal farming, where you get maybe 2, 3, 4, 5% extra yield. You get more uptake of the feed. And you may think of that in cost terms, but it's also a sustainability thing, because you then have the 4 or 5% less acreage to actually produce the stuff you want to produce. The last thing we're working on here is on agriculture, where it's really cool, and I'll admit we do not understand the science yet, but just wait until we understand it. It's really cool that a corn plant is recruiting the right set of microbes in the soil. And if you can make available the right microbes in the soil, you actually get much higher yield. So when the UN calls out a quest for 17% more food by 2050, our way of looking at that is to say, okay, if we can do 6, 7% more on some of the major row crops, that's a pretty significant contribution, everything else being equal. Last year, we saved the planet through our technologies, 76 million tons of CO2. We have a target of 100 by 2020. 76 million tons of CO2 corresponds roughly to 35 million cars on the street. So it's not everything, but it's a pretty significant contribution. And that brings me to the way we think about the Sustainable Development Goals. We think of them as an inventory of business opportunities. As Jeffrey Sachs pointed out before, they are really, really inspiring challenges for all of us. They are inspiring goals, but they also list of business opportunities. So to us, this is business. We've taken these goals, we've looked at them, we've said, where can we make a positive contribution? Where can the technology that we work with, where can that make a contribution? And then we try to focus on that. It's not going to save the world, but it's going to help. And then we try to do as little harm on the others as we possibly can. And I think if there were a lot of other companies, just to get back to Jeffrey Sachs' point, that did the same, then we would actually move much faster in that direction. We put it into our, we call it our purpose. There are many ways and many colorful ways of expressing purposes. I'll just point to a couple of things in this purpose statement that drives the company. The first one is together. This is a world where the speed by which we need to move is so daunting, in particular when you get to climate change, that this is going to require a very strong collaboration between regulators and companies who holds or who develops the technologies. So this is not a company that can do it, or a government that can do it, or a city that can do it. This is going to require that we work together. The other thing I would like to call out is the last piece: let's rethink tomorrow. I think often when we think about these things, we are marginal in our approach. We think marginally, and in very often, the right way to think about these systems changes is actually to think about if not revolutions, then at least to rethink processes. So my point here is that if companies, governments, and cities would actually work together, I think we have the solutions for quite a bit of the challenges that is expressed in the 17 SDGs. But it requires that collaboration. This purpose statement gets some of the most brilliant scientists to work for our company. They will not work their butt off to create shareholder value, but they'll work their butt off to change the world. So this is a very strong driving force for a company. But let me close it here, David. Thank you so much.
That was really, really helpful. And I guess the thing you say about working together is something I'd like to have you discuss a little further. And I don't know how did you respond to Jeffrey Sachs? Or did you heard him, I assume? And what would you say? Is the working together idea a reasonable, promising way for us to respond to the very bracing challenge that he put to us?
I'm trained as an engineer, as a scientist, and I'm probably addicted to technology, as I understand we're going to talk about over lunch. But I'm quite passionate about using technology to actually achieve these goals. I'm very passionate about it. And I think if we work together, I actually think when you look at, for example, climate change, all the reports that are coming out would indicate that if we put technology to work that we actually know of today, and Novozymes is just a part of that, if we put that to work, we actually have about 2/3 of the solutions.
For what? All the SDGs?
For climate change.
For climate change.
I mean, I think that's the most.
Just current technology, you think?
Then we don't have it all, but we have quite a bit of it. And I think the reason that I think we've been at a standstill ever since the financial crisis. We've lost about 10 years, and I think the issue is one of speed rather than one of technology. I think when it comes to speed, it's really important to get. I mean, the Paris Accord, as Jeffrey was referencing, but to get governments and companies to work together, because otherwise we're not going to make it with the required speed. Now, am I optimistic? I'm pretty optimistic about the SDGs. I think climate change is a tall order, and we really need to move fast. So as a company, we're doing everything we can to make sure that governments, including this one, understands the potential of the technology so that they can regulate around the technology and bring it to market.
Yeah, well, for example, I mean, I suppose, but one thing you didn't go into detail on is what you started about lowering washing temperatures and the temperature that your shirt was washed at, that your enzymes, which go into cold water laundry detergents, are able to get clothes just as clean as if they were washed with hot water, but the temperature differential between 140 and 80 degrees requires so much less energy that the carbon production is dramatically reduced.
Right.
So meanwhile, there's still tons of laundry detergents being sold that require hot water. So not that I'm saying regulation should help your business per se, but it is an implicit, one way one could just interpret your thought in a concrete context here is that we really could legislate, for example, that all clothes could, that all laundry detergents could be capable of washing in cold water, for example.
There are many things we could do. So that's on energy efficiency. There are so many things where regulators could promote technologies that would actually be economically beneficial for societies. It just doesn't happen because of the slowness of the system. You're absolutely right. For example, in the US, if just all of you washed your shirts at 80, then the US would save another 2 million tons of CO2, which would be quite significant. And in a decade, we'll all be washing in tap water. Now, I think the big sustainability task on laundry is that where we went up to 140, and in some cases, I guess 190, was because of hygiene issues. Now, the big task here is, and that's a no, it's an issue you can deal with today in detergents. The big task is to make sure that Asians do not move from cold water wash up to 140. Because that's when the 4.5 billion in Asia, if they move up, then we have a real issue. So it's the big sustainability issue is really to keep that at cold.
Because they've historically not felt it necessary to use hot water, but you can offer them an alternative to stay with the more or less the same techniques.
That's right. I think the government intervention is really about speeding up technologies. I'm not asking for, I'm not an advocate of subsidies and all that. I'm just asking to make technologies available. You see, in many ways, chemistry, energy as we know it today in our world was invented by German scientists in the 1880s. The last century was one of energy, fire, and brimstone. That's not sustainable with 9 billion people on the planet, as Jeffrey pointed out so eloquently before. I think biology, and a lot, that it's not the only technology, but that and a couple of other technologies can actually pave or create a road of more sustainable development as we phase out the use of fossil fuels, which is one of the main sources of the climate change issue.
So completely phasing out fossil fuels, you think should be one of our goals?
Completely is a very, it's a harsh word. I'm not sure it will ever be completely. Again, if you look, just look at what the experts are saying. The International Energy Agency has this simple model, which is behind the Paris Accord, which says that we have to be carbon neutral by 2050. So by 2050, we have to emit zero. So right now we have to go on a journey where we get from where we are today and then down towards zero emission, and then we have to stay at zero from 2050 to 2100, all if we have the aspiration of being below 2 degrees C temperature change over pre-industrial. Now, to get to at the point where you're zero by 2050 and keep that up until 2100, I don't think that necessarily requires a total emission of fossil fuels, but it requires that you develop technologies that can somehow compensate for the use of fossil fuels that you might still have, and it's certainly going to require dramatic reduction.
Well, there are carbon reduction techniques that you can apply. Of course, you're from one of the very small number of countries that Jeff said is thinking right about human habitation on the planet, basically. You're from Denmark, Danish company. So in your country, in Scandinavia, is this collaboration between government and business that and regulators and production at the level you'd like to see there, or is even there a need for a higher level of awareness? And tell me how you would categorize efforts in Scandinavia vis-a-vis, say, the United States in that regard.
I'm not sure I can make a call on the U.S. per se, but when you look at Scandinavia, then I mean, first of all, I think when you travel the international scenes, as I have a chance of doing once in a while, you see that government-industry relationships are usually much better in the smaller countries. And I think we have, I mean, it's probably, at least in my country, it's working very well. That doesn't mean that companies like mine always agree with government. We would like to see Europe, we would like to see the country of Denmark, because it happens to be our kind of backyard. We would like to see that move faster.
To be part of the EU, you mean?
Yeah.
It's so weird that it's not.
So
Why isn't Denmark part of the EU anyway?
I'm here to say that I think we'd always bitch a bit about government, and I think your question about, so what would you do, is the right one, because it's not always that easy. But I would like to see the European Union move faster than they do. In the U.S., the U.S. has actually made some pretty great strides particularly on the bush, actually, in terms of making inputs more renewable. I'm hoping that will, I mean, the journey continues. Of course, there are worrying signs, but I'm hoping the journey continues.
One thing I know you're concerned about is technical education in the Western world generally, United States and Europe. Talk about that, and what leads you to conclude about China?
Well, I think the realization of the need for sustainable growth, as is expressed in the 17 SDGs, may be higher in Northern Europe than it is in other parts of the world. I mean, I think that's probably true. But as that spreads, and we're here to spread that message, as that spreads, the next one is, okay, so what do we do about it? And then it's just a simple, fact that the OECD countries, these wealthy countries, they are they have a significant deficit of science, technology, engineering, and math resources. We're simply not producing enough candidates. So while the realization may happen in this part of the world and in Europe, we are probably going to look to China and India to actually recruit the competencies that can help us deal with it. So I think
and Nigeria, as we just heard, but certainly there's a lot more people in China and India.
And China produces about 4 million engineers every year. It's just an amazing amount of engineers that comes out. So we'll be looking to these countries to help us design these solutions. Now, I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it just means that the OECD countries are foregoing job creation opportunities, and also I think long-term value creation, because we simply don't have these resources, and we're short of these resources. So anything we can do together, businesses can do to excite young people about going into science or technology or math or engineering, we'd all be better off.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much, Petter. I look
you.
forward to more conversations. And your company is a role model, and I think helps us understand how we could respond to Jeffrey Sachs more effectively. So thank you so much for doing it and doing such a great job of it. Okay. I think continuing on our theme of responsibility and climate action, Carl Ganter, who is an expert at global water situation and runs a group called Circle of Blue and is himself also a journalist, will take over from here.
Great. Hard to follow that. Well, what I love about Techonomy is it really does bring together the superheroes in technology and storytelling. And so my mission as a journalist and photojournalist is to really activate the superheroes and tell some of the world's most important stories. And I think one of the most important stories today is about our water planet and about water and climate. So I went to a higher order and I asked an astronaut what it was like looking down on our water planet. And I'll actually read this. This is Jerry Linenger. He spent 4 months in Mir, a Soviet space station, basically by his terms held together with twine and duct tape. It was a tough ride. He was looking down on this blue planet, basically saving every drop of his water from his sweat and urine. At the same time, he's looking down at, quote, a closed ecosystem. Only so many sources of life-sustaining water, and all the creatures of Earth, just like the three of us circling it, all dependent on water. And guess where he picked to live? On the Great Lakes. So literally, he picked out his place where he was going to land and that's on the Great Lakes up in Lake Michigan. So we heard about the Sustainable Development Goals earlier today. These are what they look like. We just saw them from Novozymes. They're pretty exciting as far as a path forward. And if you look at it, water really runs through almost all of them. So number 6 is clean water and sanitation. You can take notes, or you can find all this online at the UN. So the number 2 is zero hunger. It's a little hard to read here. Gender equality, number 5. Most of the women around the world carry the water. It's the women who do the work, carrying the water. And then you look here at responsible consumption and production. We're talking about the circular economy. I would argue that everyone in this room has a supply chain or a source that is reliant on a safe supply of water, whether to cool your servers or to feed your crops. And then you have sustainable cities and communities. Hear more about that in a second. You have industry, innovation, and infrastructure. You have affordable and clean energy. It goes on and on. Water runs through all of them. Luckily, number 17 is all about collaboration, so it actually brings them all together. But back to Jerry orbiting, what's the perfect line for space looking down on the blue planet? Yes, Houston, we have a situation. We have a problem. Our blue planet is thirsty. And so the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report, the last 5 years, water's been moving up on the list until we're mostly 70% water ourselves, hit number 1. And we actually got water crisis. We got that I changed to an E. So now we're not only number 1, but we're multiple crises. We're plural. And this is what the world's water situation looks like. This is where our water stress points are. So when you're looking at geopolitical risk, you're looking at water supplies, you're looking at supply chains, look for the band where the water stress is. This is where we really need to focus our attention globally. And some quick numbers to pick up on Jeffrey Sachs this morning. 40% of the world's people are being affected by water scarcity. 2 billion are compelled to drink unsafe water. 4.5 billion do not have safely managed sanitation, the other side of the water challenge. This is a really important number. 700 million could be displaced. We've seen what's happening now with Syria and now also with Cape Town and Day Zero. What a great brand. A lot better than what it used to be, talking about transitioning water from supply or from sanitation to supply. They used to call it from toilet to tap. We're finally getting to better branding about our crises. Day Zero candidates also. You can see some usual suspects here, but look, London, Tokyo, Miami. These are Day Zero candidates. They could run out of water. You could be in line for water. Imagine Cape Town, 4 million people waiting for water from 200 different water points. That's what they were preparing for. So when we step back and I asked Jerry, so looking down the planet, what did you see? He saw dust storms emanating from Inner Mongolia, blowing across to Beijing, reaching all the way to Los Angeles. What an awesome view to see how closely connected we are. So I asked Jerry, I said, well, what if you threw a golf ball out the window? Where would it land? Of course, I'm not a physicist or an astronaut, obviously, but it would land here. It would land in Inner Mongolia, so I went there. Like I said, I'm a journalist, I'm a photographer. Our secret weapon, as we call it, IWT, when people say, how did you get the pictures? How did you get the stories? And you actually say, I was there. So I went, literally went. So I said, okay, where would this golf ball land? It would land here in Shilinghat, Inner Mongolia, and it would land in the backyard of Wu Yun. She's the daughter of a Mongolian shepherd. Her well has gone dry. She has 6 coal mines around her, and now they have to drive 15 kilometers to water. These are some of the faces on the front lines of those Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 6. So then if we go to Vietnam and the coastal shifts, we're seeing this happen now. We talked about water, sea level rise. Well, what happens? Well, I went to see what may be the last rice harvest in this region of the Mekong Delta, and what's happening is the water's coming up. The water's inundating the rice paddies. So what do you do when you're an entrepreneurial rice farmer? You actually convert, you dig out your rice paddies, and you raise shrimp. How awesome is that? Except you literally turn around, and this is what it looks like. So here comes the Mekong, here comes the sea, literally being held back by plastic and mud. So this is happening in our river deltas around the world. Well, what also is the other side of this, when we don't value water, when we don't have the values and value aligned, and electricity is free to special interests like farmers in India, they don't even have switches on their pumps. They let them run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because they can. They can irrigate 24/7. Like I said, they don't even have switches, so it's mutual assured depletion, quite literally. But then what happens? Well, wait, the satellites are telling us they're still growing, the fields are green, but then You go here and they're planting rice. Well, where's the water coming from? So when the wells are going dry north of Delhi, the other picture was in Punjab, when the wells are actually going dry north of Delhi, they're turning the water from industry like this. This is a paper mill I photographed just north of Delhi. See the little bit of water coming out? There are multiple paper mills that flow into canals, and then the farmers are actually pumping from those canals to irrigate their crops. Imagine what's in that water, and heavy metals and arsenic and cadmium and all the other exciting things. But here they are. They're praying that the wastewater keeps flowing so they can keep growing and send their kids to the city. So then you go outside of Bangalore. Okay, he's washing the beets. That's great. This is groundwater pumped at a transfer station. The reason they're washing the beets is they couldn't sell them otherwise because they're using raw sewage to irrigate. They also don't eat their own produce. They send it to Bangalore or on to Delhi. So this is the water challenge that we're seeing, this kind of ebb and flow around the world. We're also seeing that Mother Nature's pushing back. We're seeing floods like this one at the base of the Himalayas. So over an 8-day period, or so over a 2-day period, 8 dams failed the base of the Himalayas. This is Modi's hydropower plan for India, and the dams are literally failing because of surges. It's like right out of a movie. But then California's the world. It's news. It's now. I'm a journalist. This is great. Run out and cover these big stories. But it feels like we're kind of covering our own demise. How do we do this better? How do we connect the stories better? And how do we move ourselves to action? Well, we turn to technology. We turn to 100% technology. Data will save the world. Well, here's the caveat. The world's not just a click away. So this is the data center at the Punjab Irrigation District. I was really careful not to wake up the servers. Sorry, that's a data joke. But what happens? So we're telling the story, right? We're covering our own demise, but we have technology. We have these different pieces of the story, like perception. We're talking about what do people actually believe? What's the reality? What are the numbers? What are the satellites telling us? And what's the context on the ground, our man out standing in his field? Why is he running his wells 24/7? And how can we change his behavior? So what if we could see around the corner? What if we could see that entire picture? Rather than just documenting, what if we could actually shift that course through better storytelling, through changing perception, reality, and context, and aligning it? So this is what we're doing at Circle Blue and Vector Center. Circle Blue covering the story, Vector Center being an AI and data company. What we're doing is we're documenting climate change, forced migration, these other risks, and we're mapping them in near real time, water stress. And then we're looking at this 15-year trend. We keep talking about 2030 around the world. This is what this is starting to look like. We're starting to see China, big major stresses in China, of course, the Middle East. This is that 2030 kind of countdown we're aiming toward in basically everything the UN, the Sustainable Development Goals are talking about. Peru, major water stress. And then we get to Australia, just got through the whole challenge in the Murray-Darling Basin. We're looking at India because we think it's a really intense crucible and a litmus test for how we can solve the world's problems. So the challenge that India has right now is the data is siloed. It's very, very, very separated. It's delayed, it's slow, and it's without context. And yet we can do vegetation monitoring from the sky. We can do groundwater sensing from the sky and the ground. And we can see, is the perception, what we believe, aligned with the reality? So when it's apart, then we get election anomalies. When we can actually bring it together and align the stories with the trusted reporting and trusted data, then we can actually connect the stories, connect the data, put it in actual context, and understand and inform the conversation. So we're making decisions in near real time and listening better to the planet and ourselves. So we're not just telling the stories, we're listening better, and we're adjusting the stories and adjusting the course. So I'd like to invite you all to participate in what we're calling, we've heard before, this fourth industrial revolution for the Earth. Okay, let's add for the Earth. So the World Economic Forum, we're participating in this. I'm on the Global Future Council for the Environment at the Forum, is participating in a very powerful way in bringing together and convening technology and technology leaders and big thinkers. How can we activate all of the sciences? Not only just the data sciences, but I always remind people we have to activate the behavioral sciences. We have to activate the social sciences. Who are those real faces at the bottom of the story, at the bottom of the arrow that Jerry dropped out of his spaceship? Because we have Wu Yan. I went back, I've been back 4 times to visit. The coal mines are getting closer. And then the last time she was standing on these swales of sand should be green. These should be the green grasslands of Inner Mongolia, where the shepherds run their sheep. And then I went back to the Marasi, which is near the Pakistan border, and spent my time with this family and walked with the young women as they got water. So they're walking further and further as wells go dry. So this is what's happening around the world. So how do we shift that story? Well, yesterday we heard in the morning that hope is power with your sleeves rolled up. Well, what we really need to do is make hope visible in all of our stories and all of our data, because we have this opportunity to align our perception and our reality and context. If we do it separate, if we forget the narrative, if we focus just on the data, we take the people out of it, and we don't have that moment for reflection as to why this what's our purpose, and what's this actually mean in moving forward. So thank you very much. I hope you'll follow Water and Climate, and circleblue.org is our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. That was a great talk. Really good. Okay, we're going to have a 10-minute break, so be back here for more amazing talks. And thank you all for being here.
Please enjoy a 10-minute break. We will continue our sessions at 10:50.